Welcome back to the Precision Health podcast for another episode. So, today I will be talking about simple steps you can do in your day to day life that will make all the difference if your goal is to live longer and better. Now, research has improved our life expectancy tremendously, meaning that over the past century or so, we're starting to be older and older, which is great on average, but that doesn't necessarily come with increased quality of life in those older years. On the contrary, sadly, a lot of people get older, but that older age comes with ill health, such as cardiovascular disease, cancers, Alzheimer's, autoimmune diseases, type 2 diabetes, lots of ill health trajectories that we don't really want and that kind of take away the quality of life. Now, research in the past decade has started to look into something called health span. Rather than just increasing our lifespan, how long we live, they've started to look into how can we actually improve the quality of life, our health, so that we can enjoy those extra years. Because even in the earlier years nowadays, people are starting to be riddled with a lot more diseases, cancers, even type 2 diabetes is much earlier nowadays. People have a lot more autoimmune diseases at an early age already. So people live longer, but they already start to be ill at a very early age often. Now, there's this great researcher called David Sinclair from Harvard University, and he's doing a lot of research into health span, and he's helped the research community improve and has contributed a tremendous amount of research in that field. A lot of his research looks at very specific biochemical markers, processes in the body, and certain drugs on how to improve these. Now, from a functional medicine perspective, we love all of this research, but we always like to look at what can someone do in their daily life without having to take certain drugs to improve and increase their health span. And there, luckily, is a lot of research on that as well. Now, in this podcast, I will be talking about some of the really simple tricks you can do starting today that will have a tremendous effect on your own health trajectory, supporting your health span, lowering or preventing any risk of autoimmune disease, cancers, lots of other fertility issues, hormone issues, you name it. Now, the first step here is to keep your blood sugar balanced. I've done a different episode in depth on blood sugar and how blood sugar spikes and drops can lead to health issues. But today I just want to talk about briefly as one of the several factors. Now, if you have constant blood sugar spikes and dips, eventually our body turns into something called insulin resistant state, where our cells stop responding to insulin and we are in a constant state of higher blood sugar. Now, research shows once we hit that point, there's a high correlation to all sorts of ill health trajectory, all-cause mortality, morbidity, such as Alzheimer's, cardiovascular disease, cancers, all the same things that I keep repeating. But even in the shorter term, every time we have a blood sugar spike, it actually makes us age, quote unquote, from the inside out. Every time we have a blood sugar spike, something called advanced glycation end products are formed. Now, what is that? When sugar, glucose, attaches itself to our cells, which are mostly made out of fat and protein, then these components are formed, and you can compare them a little bit to what happens when you put a burger on a grill, things go brown, or you put a piece of toast into the toaster, it goes all and potentially burn it. That's what happens to our cells if there are blood sugar spikes. Now, these advanced glycation end products that are being formed, they can't be reversed. They are there. Our body has to deal with them. And they cause inflammation. They cause free radical damage. They make our arteries less flexible, so they increase the risk of cardiovascular illness. They make our joints achy. They also cause more wrinkles. They basically degrade us from the inside out directly. They even call the advanced glycation end products short ages because they just make us age and rust from the inside out. Now, another thing that happens if we have a blood sugar spike or every time we have one, our immune system can't do its thing properly. Now, it will lead to chronic inflammation, which I'll talk about in the next section. but also it will lower our immune resilience for the moment. That means that if we have, let's say we're being exposed to a virus or bacteria, our immune system won't be able to respond that well. So we might be ending up with chronic infections. Also, we all have mini mutations all the time, and if they accumulate, they can contribute to cancers. Now, if every time we have a blood sugar spike, our immune system is less resilient, and something called immune escape can happen quicker, meaning that cells that should be taken care of by our immune system aren't being taken care of as efficiently, meaning that cancer cells can stay and linger longer every time we have blood sugar spikes. Now, I just mentioned that chronic blood sugar spikes can contribute to inflammation. Now, inflammation is actually the second factor that can increase aging, age-related decline on all sorts of levels, and leading an anti-inflammatory lifestyle might be one of the best lifestyle tweaks that you can make to support your healthy aging and prevent aging and decline. Now, what are some of the factors that can help lower inflammation? The top 5 of them are to increase your omega-3 intake. Now, we all have inflammation as an important part of our machinery in the body. Every time we are being exposed to an invader like a bacteria or a virus, our body actually has to mount an immune response, and that is an inflammation to kill off that invader. Also, when we have a cut, we need inflammation to go and bring all the different inflammatory cells there to heal and support our system. It's only when that inflammation becomes chronic that it turns into an issue that causes age-related illness, infertility, anxiety, depression, you name it. Now, if we have inflammation, which we all need to have temporarily, occasionally, we need omega-3s to get rid of that inflammation. It's called inflammation resolution. Now, omega-3s are mostly found in fatty fish, such as salmon, but also sardines and other fish. And they are important to get rid of that inflammation when it's there. Now, I test a lot of my patients and I check their blood levels, and literally everyone, apart from one patient ever, had low omega-3 levels, even if they were eating fish sometimes or taking some over-the-counter omega-3 tablet. Most of us are just too low in omega-3s, and that contributes to a chronic inflammatory state. Now, the second one is to keep our blood sugar balanced. I mentioned before that blood sugar spikes increases inflammation. So obviously, to be in an anti-inflammatory lifestyle, we want to make sure that we keep our blood sugar stable. Also, we want to support our gut health. I'll talk about that in the next section in more detail, but our gut health has a lot to do with inflammation, because if we have chronic infections in our gut, they will constantly irritate our immune system to do its thing to fight off that invader. But if it's chronic and we just seem to not be able to get rid of that invader, then there's chronic inflammation all the time. Another factor is to focus on stress management and sleep. Research shows that every time we are stressed out, if we are in an acute stress, it actually helps to get rid of inflammation. But longer term, if there's chronic stress, our receptors in our cells stop responding properly to those signals, and then we develop a chronic low-grade inflammation. Also, if we're stressed out, we're less likely to be in our parasympathetic nervous system, which is that rest, digest, and heal nervous system. And we're more likely to have chronic infections because our gut can't do its thing properly, our immune system can't do its thing properly. And also, we are less able to sleep. And sleep actually is really directly linked to inflammation. And research shows that just one night of lack of good quality sleep will make us more inflamed the next day. I always find that really interesting. So if we don't have a good night's sleep, the next day, our body will upregulate something called IL-6, which is an inflammatory marker in our cells, and it will just make everything not work that well the next day. So that might be one of the simple things you can do. Just try and really focus on getting some good quality sleep. Most of the time, it doesn't have to be always, obviously, nothing is, I want to be realistic here, but just the more often, the better for you. Also, you want to add some turmeric to your kind of lifestyle, to your diet, because turmeric it's that yellow powder that is used a lot in Indian cuisine. That has been shown to have really strong anti-inflammatory components. So step number 3 is gut health. I talked about it briefly before, that if we have a inflammation, we have a chronic infection in our gut, then that will lead to inflammation. Now, why is that happening? So we all have some bugs in our gut, and we need them to make nutrients, to digest our foods, to keep our gut lining healthy. But if our gut has the wrong type of bacteria in there, not enough of the good ones, then that can lead to wide-reaching effects in the whole system. Even so much so that that researchers have coined certain terms such as the gut-brain axis, or the gut-kidney axis, or the gut-heart axis, because what our gut does is directly linked to how our brain is functioning, such as anxiety and depression, or even more serious mental health issues, but also our gut state, how that's healthy. Our gut microbiome is directly linked to our heart health, our urinary tract health. People that often have urinary tract infections, frequent ones, they often have a faulty gut microbiome, and that is directly linked. So there's lots of to our urinary tract health. So keeping our gut microbiome healthy and balanced has wide-reaching effects on everything, including keeping inflammation down, and that will help us live longer and better, because if our heart is bad, then what's it good to be living longer if we don't have a functioning system? Now, what are some of the things that we can do to support our gut that are really simple and not overly fancy? Now, number 1 is to focus on a mostly plant-based Mediterranean style diet. Ideally, you want to focus on having plenty of different colorful vegetables. They all have different wonderful nutrients, but also have some fiber that feeds our gut bacteria. We also want some other nutrients like protein that keep our gut lining healthy, our blood sugar stable. We also want to focus on stress management. Like I said in the inflammatory section, same thing happens for our gut. If we're stressed out, our brain will switch over to the fight or flight mode, and that is the opposite to our rest, digest, and heal mode. Now, only if we are in rest, digest, and heal mode can our vagus nerve function properly. Now, what is the vagus nerve? The vagus nerve has gained a lot of research over the last few years, a lot of emphasis on it, because it's been shown to be so important. Now, the vagus nerve goes from the brain into most of our organs, including our gut. And if we are in fight or flight mode, that one isn't working so well. And we need that vagus nerve to send signals to our gut to do its thing properly, to keep it strong, to keep the immune system on, to keep it functioning well. Now, if we're stressed, that doesn't work so well. So then we have chronic infections, we have gut overgrowth of bad bacteria. We also have that leads to chronic infections that can also lead to food intolerances to otherwise healthy foods. Then all of a sudden we react to foods that are normally healthy, and then that whole cycle becomes a vicious cycle of decline, and we don't want that. So we just try and fix things before they turn into an issue. Also, research shows that staying away from processed and synthetic foods is good for our gut health. Now, our body doesn't really know how to deal with synthetic and fake foods. It's just something that it didn't evolve to have. So it doesn't know what to do with it, and it messes with our gut. Fake sugars, for example, also, they might not spike our blood sugar, but they actually have been shown to mess with our gut microbiome. So a lot of you might have heard of the drug Ozempic, semaglutide, that helps people lose weight at the moment, in particular celebrities. It was meant to be a diabetes drug because it helps people balance their blood sugar, but it actually produces something that normally, if we have a healthy gut, our body produces itself. So it's actually quite interesting that we have to use these drugs to mimic something that, if we were just to fix everything from a functional medicine perspective, if we kept our gut microbiome healthy, then we might not need those drugs. And I'm not talking about people that actually have an illness that need it, because that's a different part of the puzzle, or a different point. I'm talking about overly healthy people. If they just fix their gut and they got their gut microbiome to work properly, then they might not have to inject these drugs that have potential side effects down the line. Another thing that you can do is to take probiotics and prebiotics occasionally to just get some good stuff back in there. Sometimes what I find, though, is that people, in particular my patients, obviously I have people that come and see me that have problems more often than not. They will have some ill response to taking pre and probiotics, and that can actually often be due to an overgrowth of bacteria. So rather than not having enough bacteria in there, which is what probiotics can help with, they have an overgrowth, also called SIBO, small intestinal bacterial overgrowth, or SIFO, small intestinal fungal overgrowth happening in there. And they actually might then, they already have too many bugs in there. So taking more probiotics and prebiotics to feed those can actually cause a lot of flatulence and bloating and just a lot more issues. So if that's you, you might want to go to a functional medicine practitioner that knows how to work with these things and test for it and get rid of it before you take some more probiotics and add a ton of fiber. There are two supplements that I found quite helpful in any kind of patient, whether that is for people with SIBO and SIFO, or whether that is for people that have too little gut bacteria, and they're berberine and butyrate. Now, butyrate has actually been shown to, it's something that our gut cells, the cells in our gut lining, can produce themselves if they get the right amount of fiber and nutrients. But oftentimes, because we're stressed, because we're not eating the perfect things, that might not work optimally. So supplementing with butyrate might be a good fix, because what it does, it helps to keep our gut lining healthy. It also has been shown to reduce an overgrowth of bad bugs, pathogenic bacteria, and increase the good ones, the bifidos and the lactobacillus and things like that. So that's a really good overall gut support. It smells tremendously like rotten eggs, so a lot of people don't like it, but usually you just have to hold your nose and get it down, and it really helps. The other one is berberine, and berberine has become almost famous because it is the natural version of metformin, which has gained a lot of research and a lot of popularity over the last decade because it helps to balance our blood sugar. Now, again, I just mentioned Ozempic, how that works, how our gut bacteria has a lot to do with our blood sugar balance. Same thing goes for metformin and berberine. They have been shown to help our gut bacteria and also help our blood sugar. So they have this double effect. They help support our good bacteria, help get rid of the bad ones. And as a side effect, a quote unquote good side effect, is that it fixes our blood sugar imbalances or helps support it. So those are all good extra little supplements that one can take. Now, the fourth step to support our health, a simple lifestyle thing that we can do to prevent aging and just overall increase health span, is to make sure that we get the adequate nutrients that our body needs so all the cells can function optimally. Now, you have to think of our body as a cogwheel machinery of health. We have all these different cogwheels and everything needs to run smoothly for us to not run into decline and degeneration and kind of rusting and sludge building up in there. Now, we have a wonderful body and system, but it needs certain nutrients, vitamins, minerals, building blocks to do all of these things and keep everything running smoothly. So we need some protein and fats because that's what our body's made out of. A lot of our hormones and neurotransmitters such as dopamine, serotonin, estrogen, testosterone, they're all made out of protein and fat. So we need these to be able to make them. I often see people that don't eat enough protein. Let's say they have a vegan diet, and they have issues with their mood. There are lots of other factors involved, obviously, as well, but that can be one of the contributing factors, that they just don't have the right building blocks to make dopamine and serotonin, and then that can all cause a snowball effect. We also want to make sure that we have a really nice, varied, like I said before, Mediterranean style, balanced, varied diet, because we get all these wonderful plant nutrients that have different vitamins, different minerals, and they help get rid of free radicals, they help with inflammation, and they just help all of the enzymes, all the little processes in the body work more optimally, so all these cogwheels can run really smoothly. Now, we also want to make sure that we support our body's repair and healing process. Now, we all have some damage all the time that's just natural, but our body actually has wonderful processes and mechanisms to help us heal and repair and get rid of cells that are old and mutated and should be gotten rid of. And two processes in particular are called autophagy and apoptosis. You don't have to remember those names, but I'm just throwing them in there because they get thrown around sometimes on social media, so you might have heard of them. Now, there are certain strategies that we can do to support them. Number one is intermittent fasting. You've probably heard of intermittent fasting. We don't want to overdo it. There are some side effects to that as well. And I've done a whole podcast episode on that, on how much fasting can be too much and what are the pros and cons. Go to that if you missed that episode and you want more information. But intermittent fasting, giving the body some times in between meals to rest, digest, and heal is really important for overall health optimization, prevention of aging, increasing health span. You can think of it much as if you're having children running around in your house, it's really hard to clean up. You have to get rid of everyone for a little while so that everything can be tidied and there can be a deep clean being done. Same thing happens to our gut, to our cells, to our mutated cells, old cells, anything that doesn't function optimally anymore needs some time to have time to clear it out, get rid, regenerate, rejuvenate. There's another thing that this does is it helps to get rid of something called zombie cells, senescent cells. Now, those are cells that shouldn't be there anymore because they are old and they're not functioning that well anymore, but for some reason our immune system hasn't gotten rid of them. Now, going through these phases of intermittent fasting has been shown to help the body get rid of these senescent cells, these zombie cells, so that we can have fresh and new and young cells in the body. Number 6, the last step of this mini series on how to optimize your health and increase health span, is to lower your body burden of toxins and plastics. Now, this is often the hardest one because we are obviously in a world now where there are toxins everywhere, omnipresent. But if we just lower the burden, it makes it much easier for the body. Because all of these toxins, plastics, heavy metals, our body doesn't really know how to deal with them properly. We do have detox mechanisms in our liver, in our kidney. We can sweat things out. We can take things out in our stool. But it's more about a balance. If we are overloading our body with toxins and our own detox mechanisms can't handle it, then we start building these up and they can damage our cells. So heavy metals have been shown to cause damage to our brain cells, all of our DNA, cause or contribute to mini mutations, contribute to Alzheimer's, contribute to cancers. So we want to make sure that we don't overburden the body. Plastics as well, they mimic estrogen in the body, they mimic hormones, they mess with our system. And research out of Austria has shown that pretty much everyone, they took stool samples of a lot of people, and they found out that most of them have some kind of plastic in their stool. So if we can just reduce our load, obviously it's not possible to get rid of it entirely, but the less burden we have, the less we have to support our detox mechanism to clear it out so we can keep things in a nice balance. Now, for plastics, for example, I often recommend switching to glass wherever possible or stainless steel. And if you have plastic covering or packaging in the supermarket, for example, then go for only buy cold things in there, nothing that has been heated and then put into plastic, because when it's hot and it's liquid, it will absorb it more. For example, that takeaway coffee that you might love in the morning, that little layer of plastic in your cardboard cup tiny particles will absorb into that coffee. Same with your much loved Nespresso. It will have little bits of heavy metals absorbing when you're pressing that water through it, and then you are basically absorbing these metals. Now, those were the 6 main steps you can do to support your healthy living and prevent age-related decline, fertility issues, hormone issues, cancers, cardiovascular disease, all of these different things that you don't want to run into. I hope you enjoyed this episode. And again, as always, if you have any specific topics you would like me to elaborate on, please feel free to reach out to me. I would love to hear from you. Any feedback on this episode as well, reach out, and I hope to see you soon in my next episode.